Hello and welcome to Mining Beacon's latest webinar, this one focusing on cybersecurity in mining. I'm Andrew Thake, Head of Content for Mines and Technology. Firstly, before we begin, a few housekeeping comments. The webinar is scheduled to run for just over 30 minutes. Via email, all registrants will receive a copy of the recording of this webinar, and you can ask questions at any time by using the Questions tab in the GoToWebinar panel on your screen. And if you experience any trouble with sound, we recommend that you exit the webinar and then log back in again. Now to today's webinar, I'm joined by Rob LeBay, who is Director of Information Security at Vancouver-based Tech Resources Limited, and he's been working in various roles in information security for the past 20 years. Previously, he worked at companies such as Microsoft, and in 2017, Rob co-founded the Mines and Metals ISAC, of which we'll be hearing more about later. In 2017, he was named to CIM's magazine's 2017 Names to Know, and in 2018 was named one of the top 20 global security influencers by the ISAC. Sherry Burgett has dedicated the past 15 years working with people and volunteering in various roles within the military community. She currently works for the Global Mining and Metals ISAC. She enables mining companies to share information, work together, and strengthen their cyber defenses. A warm welcome to Rob, a warm welcome to Sherry, and on with our first question, which I'll probably direct towards Rob. First, I can start off by asking you, can you tell us a little bit about the Mining and Metals ISAC?
Sure. The Mining and Metals ISAC really was born out of necessity. After a major cybersecurity incident in Canada that targeted many mining companies across the country, a number of companies, 5 to start with, got together and said, enough is enough, and we're now working together to share information and collaborate on cybersecurity, recognizing it's not a competitive advantage, and working to improve the resilience of the industry. Since then, in 2017, from the original 5 companies, we've grown to over 20 companies now on 3 continents, in Canada, headquartered in Canada, in North America, South America, and in Australia, representing operations globally. So it's been quite a growth in the last 2 years.
Okay, and then Sherry, what attracted you to ISAC and cyber security? Your background isn't a traditional cybersecurity background.
So no, my background is not a traditional cybersecurity background. My original background was actually theology, and then I was a gamer for many years. My husband was in the military. I volunteered within the community, and then I sort of found myself at a hacking conference, and I was sort of drawn to cybersecurity, just sort of the mystique of everything. I kind of like how people work and what makes them tick and why people behave the way that they do. And so I sort of found my element there. And that's actually where I met Rob LeBay, where he found me at a hacking conference, and we got to know each other over the few years as I was earning my cybersecurity degree, so that when he started the ISAC, he said, I know the perfect person that can help me with this, because she has experience with building community that we need for cybersecurity in the industry.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. So let's kind of look a little bit now as to why should miners prioritize cybersecurity. And Rob, if a mining company is listening to this webinar, why should they be prioritizing cybersecurity in 2019?
I think if a mining company maybe is just starting to prioritize in 2019, they might be a little bit late. But ultimately, as the mining industry is moving to a much more digital, much more automated mode of production. As we introduce more autonomy, more connections, more reliance on machine learning, artificial intelligence, we're connecting our operations, our exploration efforts, our systems more than ever, and we're getting to the point where safe production is now dependent on technology. And if somebody is able to disrupt that, it's getting to the point now, and we're seeing it in other industries, whether it be in shipping with Maersk, or on the metal side with some of the metals processors that have had cyber incidents now. A cyber attack now isn't just an annoyance. It will actually stop production or impact safety. So we're really getting to this point where cybersecurity is a precondition to safe production as we move forward into 2020 and beyond.
Mm-hmm. So, Sherry, what are the different types of cyber security risks? I read a bit about sort of blackmail, ransomware attacks by environmental groups. And can you also tell us a bit about how the psychology, intentions, and cost to your business differ?
The different types of attacks are basically, I categorize them by motivations of the attackers. So most of the attacks that you'll see are financially motivated. They also have political motivations, or like the environmentalists, belief or cause motivations, where you see your hacktivists. So when you break it down into motivation, you can sort of predict what type of tactics they would use in order to gain access or get what they want, because the different groups and motivators, determine how their outcome's going to be. So I think analyzing the types of people that would attack mining companies is probably the first step in analyzing risks.
And then, in terms of, I've always kind of wondered as to who actually would become a sort of a cybersecurity hacker. What is their sort of psychology? What is their sort of background? It's obviously unusual sort of career path to go and take,
What I find interesting is a lot of people who are hackers do not see what they are doing as wrong. They see it as a business, a legitimate business, or they're doing it for a cause. And so in their mind, they are the good guy. In a lot of cases, they don't see themselves as evil. And so it's sort of a swap, if you will, that the person that they're attacking could be the bad guy in their mind.
Question that's been sent in: do these sort of cybersecurity hackers end up working for some of the vendors and some of the solution providers?
I don't see a lot of hackers end up by working for solution providers. People used to think that was the career path into cybersecurity. Hack a company, get a job. Hack a company, go to jail is more likely the scenario.
Okay. So back to Rob. When I talk to majors, let's say defining the majors that have been the top 30 mining companies globally, they tend to get the business case for cybersecurity. However, when I talk to some of the smaller junior producers, they have it lower down on their list of priorities. How can they be won over?
I think it's interesting because, in the junior space, there's such competition for limited resources. The pool of capital just isn't there that you might find at a major. However, on the flip side, those juniors tend to be the most agile and the most innovative and aggressive in applying new technology because they're smaller, more agile, and they have to be creative to get things done quicker. And so when we look at that, and particularly in the junior space, they're actually the organizations most at risk should a cyber incident occur. Ultimately, if you're a major and you have a cyber incident that impacts 15, 20% of production, even 100% production at a site for a period of time, you may be able to absorb that. You might have 8, 10, 20 other sites to kind of spread that around. If you're a junior, a $50,000 or $100,000 touch on the cybersecurity side for an incident starts to become a pretty significant problem very quickly. And so the case for cybersecurity for the junior is actually stronger. The problem is a lot of the cybersecurity vendors, the only solution they propose are very expensive solutions that are just out of reach, which leads junior mining companies to go, well, I can't afford this anyway, so let's just hope for the best. And, you know, hope I get lucky until I can afford these big, expensive, fancy solutions that my vendors are telling me I need. When the reality is actually the opposite. For a junior, doing effective cybersecurity doesn't have to be expensive, doesn't have to be complicated. It's only when you get to the scale, really, of a major company or a large mid-size that scale brings complexity and cost. But as a junior, it doesn't have to be expensive or difficult, you know, contrary to what the vendors are telling you.
That kind of like leads into one of the questions that was sent in before by one of the attendees. It's an attendee who works for a mining company about to move from exploration into development. And their question was, well, how many years out from production should I start to consider cybersecurity as a threat? Sherry?
So how many years out? As soon as you have a laptop computer, you should care about cybersecurity. So, or an iPhone or Android. As soon as you have access to the internet, you should care about cybersecurity. But like Rob was saying, it doesn't have to be expensive. The 90% of the attacks you can prevent with two-factor authentication and patching your equipment, and it's much easier to do if you have just a few assets to protect. And so it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. A lot of those security features are built into the software. And so if you have a strong policy as to this is how our company is going to operate as far as cybersecurity, we're always going to deploy automatic patching or automatic Windows updates. We're always going to implement two-factor authentication whenever possible. You reduce a whole lot of risks where other small companies may just say, well, we're small, nobody's after us. We can sort of be lax about our security until we think it might be a problem.
Kind of like following on from that is a lot of miners I speak to see cybersecurity as a black swan event. One of those things that only ever happens to someone else. What do you say to them?
I think that idea has sort of gone away as we've seen many smaller companies hit, many larger companies hit. Cyber incidents, cyber attacks do not discriminate who they target or who gets hit, because a lot of things are just sort of out there in the wild. A lot of things are just targeted against small companies in order to get to a larger company. It doesn't matter your size anymore.
And I guess to lead on from that, I understand that ISEC have done some work on the likelihood of ransomware attacks and attacks by environmental groups. Are there any sort of stats and results that you can go and share with us?
On as far as ransomware, we sort of did a poll earlier this year where I believe it was 65% of ISAC members had discovered malware on their ICS system, ransomware. And so in their ICS environment, which is a major shift from where we were seeing none in the previous year.
And Rob, what is the average cost to a mining company of cybersecurity breach?
I really, when we look at it across the board, on the corporate network, typically, if you can get off, average cost now is in the neighborhood of $150,000 to $200,000 for remediation of a successful major cybersecurity incident. For a small to medium-sized organization, to a large organization, your average remediation cost is in the neighborhood of $3 to $4 million at this point. On the process control systems, you're looking at, on average, what we're seeing across process control industries is full production stoppage of 2 to 4 weeks, and major impairment of production as you kind of get things back going that can extend 3 to 6 months or longer. So the impacts, depending on the environment and company size, will vary, but they tend to be fairly significant in the case of major incidents.
So I think we've kind of established what the we've established as to how important cybersecurity is, and I think we've talked a little bit about the cost of cybersecurity to a mining company. And now we sort of like move a little bit on to as to how can mining companies go about preventing a cybersecurity breach. Again, for yourself, Rob, so if one's sort of approaching the challenge of cybersecurity from a blank canvas, what does a good cybersecurity strategy and approach look like?
I think it starts with 3 things. Number one, as Sherry alluded to, do the basics really well and do hygiene really well. It's generally, especially in a junior or a mid-size, fairly inexpensive and not too challenging to do in terms of ensuring environments are as patched as possible. Use the security features in your environment, whether it be G Suite or Office 365. Turn on the multi-factor authentication features. Use what you have already. That's relatively inexpensive. And then the other main piece of advice is don't try to do it by yourself. Whether it be through our ISAC or other routes, seek out peers in your industry and collaborate and share information. Will give you a good sense of where others are prioritizing, the lessons that others have learned, so you're not wasting time and money working through that process. It's important to remember that no matter where you are in the maturity, you're likely not breaking new ground here. And so there's others you can work with and other experience you can lean on to get there.
And I guess following on from that, again, another question that was sent in earlier is, I guess, how would you go about vendor selection? Are there any particular vendors you can recommend? Are there any vendors that ISAC work closely with?
So on the vendor side, I think ultimately there's a number of vendors that are good. However, the challenge is for every security vendor, a lot of them are small with one stream. So all you have is a hammer. Everything looks like a nail. And so they'll try to position their solution as the answer to all of the problems. I think instead of focusing on vendors specifically, instead you focus on doing the basics and assessing your risk and determining once you've done those basics where your largest risk area is, and then seek out specific point solutions for where that problem might lie, as opposed to starting and leading with a vendor and trying to solve security with a purchase order. Cybersecurity really is predominantly a people and a process problem, which are not problems you solve with purchase orders.
Mm-hmm.
It's not you can't spend your way to security.
Sure. In terms of when you are looking to sort of like get sort of like buy-in, we usually talk about doing sort of step change improvements first. I mean, is there kind of like an average amount of money a junior producer might have to spend on cybersecurity to start making step change improvements?
I think from a junior producer, most of the juniors I look at can actually start to make significant changes for, well under $100,000 US. Mm-hmm. So, we're not looking major changes at that point. Those step changes could be made by having a consultant come in and review your hygiene and give you recommendations to fix those issues. That's a relatively inexpensive exercise to do. May even be free depending on the type of contracts you have with some of your infrastructure vendors. A major step change could be made even simply joining an organization like Mining and Metals ISAC, because that would give you access to those shared security services that the cost is shared across the industry. As a junior, your share of that cost would be very small, and you get that benefit of the visibility and the awareness provided by the ISAC. That would also give you the ability, the next big step change comes from having effective policies and procedures. Joining an ISAC like Mining and Metals ISAC would give you access to somebody like Sherry, who could sit with you and help you develop those policies and procedures and roadmaps to get there. Again, all for a fairly low cost. Like I said, the major costs and complexities really come in as you get larger and you have to deal with scale. But at the smaller scale, at the lower end, we're not looking typically at millions and millions of dollars to do something. You can get started relatively cheaply, and that would give you, at minimum, a step change up in basic security, but also a really solid view of what your risks actually are to determine if you're at the point where a larger, more significant investment even makes sense for you to make.
We talked a little bit earlier back about sort of getting buy-in from above, Sherry. In theory, given sort of like in mind as to how much we talked about what the cost of a cybersecurity breach is, convincing senior management should be simple. How can people who need to go on this call, who need to on this webinar, who need to go and convince the senior management to adopt cybersecurity? How do they go about convincing them? Because often getting buy-in often seems to be part of the challenge.
Well, sometimes it helps bringing in a third party to talk about specific issues in cybersecurity that are a risk to the organization, whether it be insurance, legal risks, or cybersecurity risks, and they're all related. But bringing in somebody else that would maybe even say the same things you do, sometimes hearing it from a verified, trusted source sometimes helps with that. I know a couple of our members have brought me in to speak with their board about different topics, not necessarily whether the importance of cybersecurity, but why a certain threat may be a risk to them personally. So I think bringing in outside help when needed, or discussing it with your peers is also another route that other members have found helpful.
Mm-hmm. Question sort of something that I'll probably direct also to yourself, Sherry. Does ISAC also work with other sort of sectors in terms of getting in outside experts? So, for example, the oil and gas sector or other sort of verticals where there might be some key learning points?
We have a partnership, and we belong to a larger organization of similar organizations. ISOs is what they call them. So we're under the International Association of Certified ISOs, and they have maritime and ports, and ports security is definitely linked to mining, because we rely on them for our shipping. We also have a close relationship with downstream natural gas. So yes, we do share information with each other and share reports. So yeah.
Okay. Rob, we're reading a lot more about mining companies adopting automation. I'd probably imagine that automation increases the opportunity for cybersecurity hackers. What steps can be taken to mitigate risk within that area?
I think certainly when we look at automation in cybersecurity, we talk about it, increasing the attack surface. If you take a haul truck, for example, whether it be a large haul truck in an open pit mine or a smaller hauling vehicle underground, when there's a driver sitting in the cab, the opportunity for somebody outside to potentially interfere with that is pretty small, because you have that driver that can take action as you go through. When we look at that sort of use case and the automation, we're connecting now vehicle systems to networks that at their base they were never designed to be connected to. They were never designed to operate in that sort of a connected environment. So we absolutely introduce cybersecurity risks. The challenge comes through is in modeling those risks and understanding them so that you can design controls. The way we handle that for something like autonomous haulage systems as an ISAC is by forming a working group. We have 12 companies working together to model and understand the risks of autonomous haulage systems. And so now all of the members of the ISAC can benefit from that report, and as they think to implement that technology, can get that sort of joint learning. And we'll continue to do that for other automation systems. But the key overall to think about is, where am I connecting things that were never originally designed or intended to be connected? And modeling those risks is where you find typically your problems.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've got time for, just allow for sort of like 5 to 10 minutes for questions. So if anyone wants to send any questions, now's a good time just to send a few in. Just to start off with one that was sent in earlier. Is cybersecurity a greater problem in some countries or jurisdictions? I'd, for example, imagine it might be greater problems in like emerging markets. Is that correct, or?
I would say yes. Definitely, we see a lot more, or I see a lot more from South America than North America. They're different risks, though. It seems as though emerging markets have emerging risks. It's sort of a playground for testing out new malware, and so we see it in places like that before we see it in North America.
Mm-hmm. And a question I think is probably best for Rob is, can you kind of give a bit of like an outline as to, obviously you've now been at tech for a number of years. Can you give a bit of an outline as to what tech have, top 2 or 3 things that tech have done differently within the cybersecurity space since you've come in?
I think really, without speaking to specifics, I think it comes to, it boils down to sort of awareness and risk modeling and understanding. Cybersecurity is not now a isn't a technical problem anymore at its core. That's why the ISACs brought in somebody like Sherry. It's actually a people problem, and it's a process problem. And so ultimately, most of the major mining companies have, over the past 5 years, sort of come to that realization that this isn't an issue to be discussed at the in the basement with all the technical people. This is an issue that needs to be discussed at the executive levels in the boardroom as a business risk. And I don't think that's exclusively limited to tech, but really is something that the industry as a whole is starting to realize and shift to.
Mm-hmm. So if somebody is looking to join a cybersecurity sort of team, either at a vendor or a mining company, we've obviously established earlier on that their background probably isn't going to be a cybersecurity hacker. But it sounds if it's not always an IT background. It sounds as if it could have like a different sort of like discipline. Are you considering the light that within your cybersecurity team as to what's the sort of makeup? Is it very cosmopolitan in terms of their degrees and backgrounds and their experiences then?
I think today, absolutely. I think if you were to look, that's the other transition. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, most cybersecurity teams, if you look, were ex-developers, ex-IT administrators, a lot of computer science degrees, lots of engineering degrees. Now, as cybersecurity is becoming more of an elevated, more of a business conversation, and the importance of understanding the adversaries has picked up, you're seeing a need to balance that technical expertise, which you still need, with folks with political science degrees or theologians or communications or psychology degrees. And so those sorts of backgrounds, sort of coupled with the technical, as well as folks that really understand business to figure out impact. So you find a lot of accountants and former auditors seem to find their way into cybersecurity. I think by combining those sorts of disciplines along with the technical, you start to build a really strong capability.
Mm-hmm. Question that was sent in, I'll direct this to Sherry. When you have these cybersecurity breaches and you uncover the source, how often is the source of the breach somebody from the inside as opposed to somebody from the outside?
I don't know percentages, honestly, but I do know that a lot of times inside threats aren't identified as a breach. They're identified as an incident that was contained and no breach occurred. A lot of times, so I'm going to tell you that inside threats occur often, but they're usually contained and the person is let go because, they were either purposefully malicious or they're seriously, I'm going to say incompetent. Otherwise, training, you have to evaluate whether or not it's malicious or they're just really incompetent or, they could be trained. And if they can be retrained like it was an actual accident, they didn't mean to do it, then retrain them. But a lot of those cases don't get reported as breaches, and we will never hear about them.
Sure. Okay. Another question sent in. I was going to say, I'm just going to read it out because it's just coming here. What do you suggest to buy for the best complete and end-to-end enterprise security system, including S-W, H-W, and UTM?
So there are a number of options from a number of vendors that are good end to end, and the answer is all of, some of, or none of, depending on your particular situation and risks. So if you're leading with, I'm looking for a vendor to sell me stuff, you're going to probably get a decent solution, but not the best. Instead of saying, this is the alphabet soup solution I want, you need to look at it as these are the risks I'm trying to mitigate, and start looking from that point. And you actually might find the solution you come to is going to be very different from what you went looking for when you said I need a pick your alphabet soup solution. I think instead of approaching it that way, you approach it from, here's where I see my greatest area of risk. Here's the problem I'm trying to solve, and look for solutions to the problem versus looking for instead of having a solution that's looking for a problem. I think who's ever asked the question is maybe looking at it a bit backwards from that point of view.
Okay, I certainly encourage the person to ask the question to definitely go on the ISAC website and kind of find out sort of more, where you can obviously find Rob's sort of details and share his details if you have some more questions. I just kind of like link to that just as like a closing question. So if people want to join ISAC to find out more, how can they? Is it just to go to your website? Do you also run events, etc.? Or
we will be having a conference this December, the first week of December at Kennedy Space Center. And anyone in the mining industry, you don't have to be a member to come and participate. We're doing a industry-wide cyber exercise. You can learn more about our ISAC, and we'll be sharing tips, tricks, experiences over the course of 2 days. So that's our biggest event coming up. We have it every year, and Kennedy Space Center is a pretty sweet location.
And you'll also be able to find us in London for Mines Technology. We'll be there in November for the London event. And of course, like I said, you always reach out to us at, there you go, get the slide up. You can also reach out to us at info@mmisac.org, and somebody will get back to you.
Okay, thank you very much for that very kind plug, Rob. That's all we have sort of like time for. It remains for me to thank you all for listening, and a special thanks to our guests, Rob and Sherry, for providing their excellent insights. As Rob very kindly mentioned, both Rob and Sherry will be presenting at our upcoming Mines and Technology event on November the 25th to November the 27th. All listeners of this broadcast will be entitled to a discount by using the following code MMLWeb when you're registering, and you'll get, say, 15% off. For more great news and content, please check out our dedicated website at www.miningbeacon.com. Many thanks, and see you again soon. Thank you very much.